Right Meat presents Rapsidious by Joseph Gatz. Read by Pumpkin Patch 1234. Edited by Xufei Liu. Part 5. Peter. Chapter 1. 11 years before Asher Graves found the ring of Rapsidious in a food-smart bathroom, Peter Clausen was glowing from the news that his newborn baby boy had arrived home from the hospital, safe and sound. His wife Laura was at their home, taking a nap on the couch while their son Troy slept in the crib that Peter had built before leaving on his business trip. Only there hadn't been a business trip. Peter was 37 miles away in the downtown Los Angeles Ramada Inn, spending a weekend in bed with his secretary. In the bathroom of their hotel room, Peter was brushing his teeth while Stephanie was in bed, watching Tim Gunn's Guide to Style and wearing nothing but a bedsheet. "Peter? When do you have to be back?" she called. Peter rinsed out his mouth and wiped his face with one of the soft hotel hand towels, then smiled at his reflection. He was standing in a pair of boxer briefs and admiring the contours of his muscular body. He flexed for himself and squeezed his biceps while giving himself muted oohs and ahs. Even after 1,000 years, he loved the look of his own body. "Peter!" Stephanie called again. "1 second," he called back, applying a liberal amount of moisturizer to his hand and rubbed it on his face, shoulders, and neck. When he came out of the bathroom, he jumped on the bed like a kid at a slumber party, causing Stephanie to giggle and scream. He took her in his arms and kissed her passionately, a kiss that she reciprocated. "Can't you just tell your wife that your plane got delayed?" she asked. "I could," said Peter. "But then I'd also have to tell my son, and he's not the understanding type." "Ugh," she said as she protested playfully. "You're such a jerk." "You had me all weekend," he murmured. "We went out, we danced, we came back here, and we did everything you wanted to do." "We did everything you wanted to do," she said, rolling her eyes. "Yeah," he said, "and it was fun, but I want to see my son. His name is Troy, and I can't wait to meet him." "When are you going to put a baby in my belly?" she asked. Peter grabbed her stomach and kissed her again. "Hopefully I did last night," he said, and kissed her more passionately. "Look, order us some more room service and get dressed. We gotta get ready to go." Peter bounced off the bed and went for his travel bag, rummaging for a shirt and pants. "Room service," she complained. "Can't we at least go out for breakfast?" "No time," he said. "I gotta go." Peter buttoned up his shirt in the bathroom and then put on his pants. On the porcelain of the bathroom sink, his iPhone 4 began to vibrate. He answered on the third ring. "It's Peter," he said. "Mr. Clausen?" said the voice on the phone. "I'm sorry to disturb you. My name is Gerald, and I'm calling from the front desk of the hotel." "All right," said Peter. "What can I do for you, Gerald?" "I wanted to thank you for staying with us. It's always a pleasure having you as a guest. I also noticed that you requested an express checkout, but when we went to process your bill, your credit card was expired. I see you have another card on file, so would you—" "No," he said. "Absolutely under no circumstances run that card. Look, I'm sorry. I was in a rush. I must have given you the wrong card. I'll be down in a minute, all right?" The credit card that was on file was a joint account with his wife. If she saw the charge, it would bring up too many questions. Peter viewed his indiscretions as innocent acts with no victims. He did care for his wife, but his obsession with having as many children as possible could never be satisfied. If his attempt to impregnate his secretary had been successful, she would be the 47th mother of one of his children this year, alone. "Very good, sir," said Gerald. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience." "It's fine," he said as he disconnected the call. When he came out of the bathroom, his secretary was sitting seductively at the edge of the bed with eyes that beckoned for him. Peter could already sense that the fertilization process was beginning. She would mother his child if nothing interfered. And with that, his use for Stephanie had come to an end. "I'll be right back," he said. "There's a problem downstairs. I'm gonna go deal with it." You're gonna have a problem upstairs if you leave this room. I gotta go, he repeated dismissively. Don't you dare leave this room, she called behind him. Peter Clausen, you stay right here. Peter went down the short hallway to the hotel room's door, opened it without hesitation, and left, allowing the door to swing closed on its own hydraulic closer. Approaching the elevator, he double-stepped when he noticed the bell had rung, and the door was opening. Inside, a tall man with brown hair and a clean mustache under a white cowboy hat looked at Peter with a vague recognition in his eyes as he walked past him. How's it going? Asked the man. It's going, said Peter. The man turned and watched Peter as the elevator door closed. Peter sighed softly and distracted himself with thoughts of Troy, then thoughts about the new life he had created the night before. He thought about Stephanie. She could be a problem. He might have to erase her memory. Most of the women he chose to be carriers would innately detach themselves after conception and went on to be perfect mothers for his offspring, but a few always clung on. They wanted a life with Peter. But Peter had already chosen his partner for this period of his life. He didn't have room for anyone else. Stephanie was starting to feel like one of those who would cling on, and that made her more trouble than she was worth. Chapter 2. Hey, babe, said Peter through the phone. Laura smiled as she heard his voice. Peter, she said with a soft yawn. How are you? How's the trip? Thank God it's over, he murmured. I hate these trips. Those venture capitalists always want to make promises they can't keep. At least the food's good, though. Anyways, I just landed a few minutes ago. I'll be home in a couple of hours, all right? Oh, do you want me to come get you from the airport? No way, he said. Are you kidding me? You just had a baby. You stay home and to recover. How's Troy? He's asleep, she said, looking over at the bedroom door. But he's good. Such a heavy sleeper. Is Anastasia there helping you? He asked. Anastasia was their midwife. Peter had decided that she was not the right candidate to carry his child, and thus she would be the perfect woman to have around Laura. No drama that way. She went home for a few minutes ago to change clothes. She's been with me the whole time, though. She's amazing. She went home? He asked, slightly annoyed. You're there by yourself? Peter, I'm fine. The baby's fine. She said she'd be back in an hour. Babe, he said as he reached the front of the line, waiting to be called to the front desk at the hotel. You're not supposed to be lifting the baby. That's what the nurse said. The nurse said I could lift him a little, said Laura, walking from the living room couch to the bedroom crib where the baby was completely passed out. He's an angel, she whispered. Oh, he whispered back. Are you there with him? Yes. He's asleep. Kiss him for me, he said. The front desk attendant waved a hand for Peter to approach. I'll be there soon. If anything happens, call me. Nothing is going to happen, Peter, she said. Call me if anything does, he repeated. Okay, she whispered with a smile. Love you. I love you too, he said. More than anything. Bye. Peter pulled his credit card out of his wallet and slapped it down on the desk. I'm Peter Clausen, he said. One of you called about my credit card. Oh, and can you have someone get me a bottle of champagne? I just found out I'm about to be a father. Again. Of course, sir. Chapter 3. On the elevator ride back to his room, Peter thought about his family. Not just his current family, Laura and now Troy, but his wife before Laura, Peggy, a flight attendant for Delta Airline who lived in Flagstaff, Arizona. She was a brunette who loved to sing and could stay out all night, waking up early for work the next morning without skipping a beat. And his wife before that, Mary. She was a quiet woman from Bangor, Maine, who worked in a Catholic bookstore and lived a very conservative life. Except when she went bowling, drank too much, and smoked too many cigarettes. Before Mary, he had spent 30 years with Isla. She was a woman from Inverness in the Highlands of Scotland. She was a horse farrier by trade and could play darts better than any man in the pub. Before that, Agnes was his first mate aboard his cargo ship, the Venturesome, and she was also his wife. She kept the wind in the sails, and she kept his bed warm at night. But there were also the women he hadn't loved, the women who had simply been a carrier for his genetic material. There had been thousands of those. Some women his wives had known about, some they had not. But wife or not, all of them had borne him a child. Some had borne multiple children. And now the whispers of all of those thousands of souls spoke in unison. And it wasn't just his children, but the children of those children. A pyramid of generations spanning every continent over hundreds of years that all led back to him. They all spoke to him in a never-ending symphony that could be heard just beyond this plane of existence. Sometimes he would visit them when they dreamed. He loved them as any father would love their children, but it was more than that. He drew power from their very existence. At their core, intertwined within their DNA, he lived within each of their souls. It had replaced his longing for the embrace of the unbounded. He had become his own collective. If the unbounded was the collective energy, wisdom, and life force of infinite eternities, Peter's collective of souls was the logical offspring of the unbounded still in its infancy. He was the beginning and the end. Whenever his children experienced emotions of great joy or excruciating horror, the collective called to Peter, and he relished that call. It was a beacon that would light up in the cosmic space beyond human reality, and he could walk into any of those souls and embody them. He could even stay there if his current host body failed. The elevator door opened, and for a moment, Peter was lost in the ocean of the voices he heard. His eyes had become completely dark, and his mouth was agape. It took several moments for Peter to remember himself and leave the elevator. When he reached the hotel room, he noticed that the door was ajar. He pushed it open and began to unwrap the foil on the champagne he was carrying. "Stephanie," he said, "I brought us a little something." As Peter cleared the hallway, a smile he had forced onto his face melted away. He dropped the bottle onto the floor with a loud thud. On the bed, Stephanie was lying limp and lifeless with a hole torn through her stomach and a spray of blood coating the fitted sheet beneath her. Peter's shock slowly melted into a cold, quiet rage. His offspring, which had just taken hold within his deceased secretary's womb, was not dead yet, but it would be soon. From behind Peter, the hotel room's bathroom door slowly opened, and the man with the cowboy hat exited with a magnum revolver he had used on Stephanie. It was pointed at Peter's head. He slowly walked until he was only mere inches away. "If you move," he said, "I'll blow your freaking brains out just like I've done here." Peter turned around, slowly but without fear. When he faced the man, he found eyes that were touched by insanity, wide and wild. The man smiled at Peter with an earnestness that promised violence. "I told you not to move," he said. And with that, Cowboy Hat reached back with the gun, then slammed the butt of it into Peter's nose. Peter didn't make a sound, but the force of the blow pushed him backward and onto the ground. He grabbed his nose instinctively, but there was no pain, no blood. He'd have to be human to feel anything he didn't desire to feel. And try as he might, he was absolutely not human. "That was my wife," said Cowboy Hat. "You sorry son of a gun. I knew she was cheatin'. Late nights at the office, business trips every few weeks, frilly panties she never wore for me. I knew it. But I didn't know it was with such a sorry sack like you. I figured she'd at least have traded up." "Ah, doesn't matter now, does it?" "Nope, sure don't." Peter stood up but didn't move. What had been taken from him could never be given back. There would never be a life on this earth equal to the one that had just been extinguished. His overwhelming fury had temporarily immobilized him. "You're a married man, right?" said Stephanie's husband. "I know you are. She told me just before I put a hot one through her belly. But before I did, I made her pull out her phone. And guess what, my friend? Your wife's about to find out what you've been up to. You see, Stephanie was a real good secretary. Yup, she was. She kept all your contacts on her phone. So before I shot her, I told her to call your wife and tell her everything. I told her to share every nasty little detail. Man, you should have heard her squirm, crying and apologizing while she blabbed over the phone. Your wife didn't answer, though, so I made her leave it all on a message. So after they find you and her dead on this dirty hotel room floor, I'll bet she finds that message. I guess you can call that a blessing, right? Maybe your wife won't feel so bad. Stephanie's husband extended the gun and shot into Peter's chest. The shirt was destroyed instantly, but his flesh was unharmed. The man in the cowboy hat looked at his gun in confusion, then aimed it again, shooting Peter a second time, then a third time. Before he could empty his chamber of its final round, Peter got up and walked over to the man and reached through his body and squeezed him by his still beating heart. There were no cuts. There was no blood. Peter's body had seamlessly melded into the man's living tissue. The feeling was so bizarre and overwhelming for the cowboy that he could do nothing but hold in a deep breath and tremble. "You've taken my child from me," said Peter. "You've taken a piece of me. So I will take a piece of you in return." Peter pulled out the man's heart. There was no blood, no sign of an incision. The bone-white, bloodless heart even continued to try to beat for a moment longer within Peter's hand before slowly growing still. The man first fell to his knees, then face first onto the ground without taking another breath. Peter looked down at the dead cowboy, then dropped the heart as if it were an afterthought and pulled out his phone. He found a number in his contacts listed as cleanup and dialed. "Yes, Mr. Clausen?" said a voice on the other side. "I have 2 bodies I need removed. I'll text you the address." "Here in Los Angeles?" "Yes," he said. "We'll be there in 2 hours." "Thank you," he said, then put away his phone. He then sighed and focused on the last little detail he had to worry about. He closed his eyes, and when they reopened, once again they turned black. Chapter 4. Troy Clausen, Peter's son, slept blissfully in his crib under a mobile of plush stars and rainbows. In the distance, Laura could be heard just getting out of the shower. She would soon come out and check on the baby. On the nightstand, Laura's phone sat charging. A message on the screen indicated that there was one voicemail waiting. The baby suddenly began to shake. Its tiny little arms, fingers, legs, and toes wiggled. It opened its eyes and almost cried out, but before it could, the dark of its pupils expanded outwards. Peter had arrived. The baby was weak, but Peter adjusted its biology to give it strength. It took a short while, but soon the baby was able to sit up, then stand on its own. Peter was looking around the room through the baby's eyes. He could hear Laura in the bathroom humming to herself as she put on her makeup. Peter then looked over and was relieved to see the cell phone. He took a deep breath, then rose up into the air and floated over to the phone. Fortunately, he knew his wife's code, and he unlocked the phone, then accessed the voicemail. Sure enough, there was one new voicemail that had been recorded just a few minutes before. He cleared it away. He then floated back into the crib and restored the biology of the baby to where it had been before he changed it. He then departed and the baby's eyes returned to normal. The baby wasted no time in taking a deep breath, then let out a loud cry. Laura quickly came out of the bathroom and picked the baby up. "Oh, don't cry, little Troy," she said. "Daddy will be home soon." Chapter 5. Troy Clausen was 11 years old the day before Bob would arrive in his home. He was playing in the living room while Laura checked her Facebook. Peter was in the home as well, but his spirit was hundreds of miles away in the warehouse inside Asher's mind. Asher looked around as one by one, each and every balloon began to pop. It was slow at first. Pop, 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 pop. Then the speed began to increase until it sounded like a machine gun and the carcasses of the burst balloons falling like snow. But instead of landing flat as latex and plastic should, they instantly liquefied. Each balloon formed a puddle of brightly colored sludge, and each puddle merged together until the colors combined into a dark pool of slowly rising fluid. Asher looked down as the thick liquid first pooled around his feet, then consumed him. He tried to pull his feet away, but they were stuck in the liquid. He pointed his ringed hand towards the liquid, and while the ring itself glowed brightly, there was no effect. "Nah," said Peter within Carolyn's body. "I'm afraid that's not going to work much in here. You see, I'm in control. Your ring only works out there in the real world. But you invited me here. What a weird fantasy, by the way. You got something with balloons or something?" Asher calmly looked around for a solution to this new problem but found no immediate way out. "Where did you come from?" asked Asher. "Home, actually," said Peter. "I was sitting on the toilet when I felt you with one of my children. She's my great-great-great-granddaughter, actually, but I like to keep in touch." Caroline held her arms and legs up one at a time and looked at herself. "She's got a big of a drug problem, doesn't she?" "She doesn't regret anything she's done," said Asher. "Yeah, most people like to think that." There was a pulse of light from Caroline's eyes, and old dark blood started coming out of her ears, eyes, and nose. "I can't fix the reasons why, but at least I can completely get it out of her system." "Why didn't you do that?" "I know I can." "She didn't want it." "Well, hell, you think these people know what's best for them? Of course they don't. They're people. You were a person before you put on that ring, but you're not exactly human anymore, are you?" "I don't know what I am now," said Asher. "Yeah," said Peter. "Yeah, I know. That's kind of the problem. Nobody knows. It's why they sent me. And ever since you put on that ring, I knew you were around. I thought we should have a conversation." "You want the ring," said Asher. "That's why you're here." "The ring?" said Peter. "Actually, now that you mention it, no. But the ring is why I'm here." The thick fluid was now up to Asher's shins, and while he couldn't move, Caroline's body was able to walk on top of the sludge, moving around Asher. "Let me ask you a question, Asher. Can you see beyond time? I know the last ring bearer could. She could look through time like reading the pages of a book." Peter looked Asher in the eyes. "Can you?" Asher hadn't thought about it. He looked back at Peter, then focused on it. Suddenly, the images of Peter eating breakfast with a dark-skinned man appeared in the recesses of his brain. He couldn't control it, but it was there. A skill waiting to be learned. "You can, can't you?" asked Peter. "I saw you with another," said Asher. "Another like you." Peter bit his lip. "God damn it! I freaking knew it!" "Another is coming," said Asher. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," said Peter. "I guess that makes sense. If I can sense the ring, they sure as hell can. I mean, they already sent one. I don't know who, but I felt it. Do you see now what the ring is doing? It's drawing them closer." "Drawing who closer?" asked Asher. "Us," said Peter. "The unbounded. All that is, all that has been, and all that will be is because of us. We created the universe. We created all of the universes." "You didn't create the ring," said Asher. "I don't know if we did or not," said Peter, "but I know that it belongs with us. I know that they will be coming to bring it back. They will send as many as they think is necessary. And they will succeed eventually." "But not you?" asked Asher. "I want something else," said Peter, looking down at the sludge. It was now up to Asher's waist. "I want you to take off the ring and forget about it. Throw it in the deepest part of the ocean, or drop it into a volcano. Hell, if you want to get creative, launch it into space. I don't care, just get rid of it." "Why?" asked Asher. "So that I can stay here," said Peter. "This is my home. I like it here. I don't want to go, but you and that damn ring are going to force them to take actions. And those actions end with me going home forever. And I don't want that." "I can't trust you," said Asher. "My father told me to keep the ring safe." "That wasn't your father," said Peter. "And even if it was, it's still just a creation of the ring. It's messing with you, just like it messes with everyone. Keep that thing long enough, and you're gonna meet the last person it messed with. The last person who wore it. She's a real peach, I promise you. You do not want to tangle with that one. 'Cause if we don't get that ring, she will. And she'll get it over your dead body." The fluid rose up to Asher's face and started filling his mouth. He didn't panic, but he did his best to avoid what was happening. He was unsuccessful. "Come on, man. You want to do me a solid?" asked Peter. "Or do you want me to end this right here, right now?" Asher was choking on the fluid. He closed his eyes and focused. If this wasn't real, he thought, then he could control it. Soon the black sludge started changing in color and texture. It began flowing more freely, turning white until it became milk. From the sides of the warehouse, holes formed in the walls, and the milk level started going down rapidly. Caroline fell down into the milk, and when she stood up, she looked at herself disgusted. "What is this?" said Peter. "Milk? Are you kidding me?" Slightly enraged, Peter marched over to Asher and grabbed him by the throat, picking him up. "I could kill you now," he said. "But if I do that, the ring will just fall to someone else." Asher grabbed at Caroline's fingers as he struggled to breathe. "Will you hide the ring or not?" Around the two, the fantasy that was the warehouse began to fall apart. Peter looked around in confusion. "No!" said Peter. "Not yet! Not yet!" Asher began to lose consciousness. Peter loosened his grip and let Asher fall to the ground. Asher coughed, but he continued to black out. "Come back!" said Peter. "Come back!" Chapter 6. Nurse Lisa pulled the needle out of Asher's arm, while a few orderlies held him up. Dr. Patel held up Caroline. No one seemed to be able to make them release the grip they had on each other's hands. Caroline's eyes, that had been black when the staff entered the room, suddenly started to clear up. With that, the magnetic grip the two had shared lost its potency, and the grip was lost. The staff pulled them apart, and they carried Caroline to her bed. They wiped away the blood from her eyes, ears, and nose. She began to cough up black tar as well. She began to cry furiously. Asher they carried out of the room and laid on a waiting gurney. They strapped down his arms and legs and began to move him towards the elevator. When the door opened, Dr. Patel ran and joined them. "Let's get him to the lab for testing," said the doctor. "Call ahead. I want a full MRI done on him right away." "Yes, doctor," said one of the staff. Dr. Patel ran his hand over Asher's forehead and sighed. He then remembered something from his notes and checked Asher's hands. Upon finding the ring, he slipped it off. "Does anyone have a sample bag?" he asked. "I do," said another orderly, handing over the bag. "Send this over to Cedars-Sinai for testing. I want to know everything about this ring as soon as possible." Thanks again for checking out Rapsidious. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share, and join us next week for Chapter 6.